Hi again. So this is part 2 of my ET and UFO experiences. And I was saying that I got to the point where, having had ET experiences or UFO experiences, I was being followed around wherever I went by orange orbs. So around this time I started to put my first UFO videos online, and I started to talk about it to people online that I was talking to, and to also talk about the fact that I was experiencing orbs appearing in my flat, in my apartment, and this would be in a variety of different forms. Sometimes it would be a large orb that floated through the walls, and again we're talking about basketball size, and on one occasion a very small orb which took about 3 seconds to pass by my feet. It was literally millimeters away from my feet when it passed my feet, and was the size of a marble and had the appearance of a sparkler. So it was a very, very intense orb. And these kind of things became more and more frequent. Now during that time I found myself both excited and perturbed by it, and I noticed also that there was a change in my consciousness, as if a completely new dimension had been added to my awareness of reality. And this was a gradual process that seeped in a way, kind of seeped into my consciousness. Now the next incident that is linked to that, which is I was actually talking to somebody about seeing these orbs online, sitting in front of my computer, which was in front of my sofa, and I heard the sound of, I would say that it sounded like a synth oscillator from the early 1970s, kind of kind of that kind of noise, and a little bit like a didgeridoo as well. So you've got the that kind of modulation going on. So I thought, what on earth is that? And it was coming from the garden. Everybody else in the house was asleep. It was about 3:30 in the morning, and there was nothing going on in the neighbourhood. It was I think it was a weekday, but there was certainly nothing on. There was no music out there. So I hear this weird didgeridoo synth oscillator sound, followed by 2 notes on a flute. And at that point I knew that, that this was nothing mundane, that this was some kind of paranormal or ET experience that I was having. So I went to the window. I had these big Georgian windows, and I threw the curtains open, and the light streamed out into the garden, and there was nothing there. I could see nothing. So I was really confused. I thought, well, what on earth is going on? I closed the curtains, went to sit down on the sofa, and the room felt as though it was vibrating. And I heard a very high-pitched tone that was audible. It was certainly not the sound of, it wasn't a blood pressure tone, for example. It wasn't an internal process that I was hearing. It was in the room itself, and I was amazed because I knew that this was something of significance. And the next thing that happened was I experienced an intense vibration in the soles of my feet that was like a fizzing. If you've ever had Alka-Seltzer, you know how that fizzes in a glass. Well, I experienced something like that, like an energy fizzling that went from the soles of my feet all the way through my legs, up into my chest and out of the top of my head. And my whole nervous system changed in a very subtle way, but my nervous system felt more refined. And at the same time I felt more calm and relaxed, and more truly mentally and emotionally present. And this seems to have been some kind of attunement process that I went through. And I believe that the ETs had landed somewhere nearby, cloaked, and that I'd had this process done to me. Now, they must have thought that I would not be able to handle seeing them physically. I'll tell you in perhaps another episode of this about the time that I've actually seen ETs in the flesh, which was not long ago. But the interesting thing about this was that around that time I was not in a good space, because I'd been in a long distance relationship with someone who I had lived with in France, and it hadn't worked out. Actually, for quite amazing reasons. I experienced spiritual contact with my girlfriend's deceased husband in a very dramatic way, which she also experienced. And in a way I was forced out of the house. So during this period I not only experienced and realised that the spirit world is real without any doubt whatsoever, but I also experienced that ETs are here, or extra dimensional, as some people might put it, but I think that's a different topic to talk about. So I experienced this process, and I was emotionally healed from an awful lot of trauma. My problems didn't end there. The relationship dragged on and it was eventually resolved, but that was a key moment for me gaining more clarity in myself. Also, when I did some research on, I happened to be watching a lot more videos, and I came across two incidents that related directly to what I had experienced with the didgeridoo sound and the flute sound. The first one was Stephen Greer, where in one of his videos he talks about hearing a didgeridoo sound when one of the craft came in and landed somewhere in the vicinity of where they were doing the CE5 protocols. And the second one was an incident in South Africa that was explored by Dr. John Mack, where some school children witnessed a UFO land, and some greys, or a variety of grey, got out of the craft, and before they did that, the children heard two long notes played on a flute. So my experience seemed to be like a combination of those two things. So that was a remarkable experience. And the amazing thing was, it wasn't in isolation, so I actually experienced the same thing roughly 2 to 3 weeks later. Exactly the same sequence of events happened. So I was put through this process twice, and I had a lot of stuff cleared during this process, and an awful lot more mental and emotional clarity about what had been going on for me, and finding equilibrium for myself, which evidently the ETs felt that I needed that kind of mental and emotional attunement. So I started to have these kinds of experiences. Now, around that time, I woke up one day and went to have a shower. I hadn't done much the previous day. And I had a shower, and I looked down. I was soaping up my legs and that kind of thing, and I suddenly noticed there was a big rectangular mark on one of my legs. And I thought, what the hell is that? And I examined it, and I took photographs of this, and it was an almost perfect rectangle that was quite deep. It had taken several layers of skin. It was into the flesh. And in fact, it still hasn't healed completely to this day. You can still see the mark on my leg. There's actually a video on my channel of some of my marks. And that got me into a bit of a panic. And I thought, what the hell is this? You know, what's going on? And I was a little bit worried. However, I put it to one side and carried on seeing orbs. Around this time, I discovered that I was able to cool orbs, and I started to cool these orbs by going to the local park. So the process itself is, for me, I've used several different processes, but one of them is to embrace the universe with love, and literally open my arms like this. And one of the many processes I use is to simply project love out as far as I can, whilst visualizing an ET orb or at the same time sending out a telepathic message, just as I had in my first experience on the bridge where I called an orb. But the basis of it is sending love out. So I started to be able to call orbs at will, and I'd be able to, what's more, they'd actually show up for me, and I would see, as soon as I opened the door, an orb floating above the rooftop, only 20 yards away from me. Or sometimes there'd be an orb 100, 150 meters up in the sky, which would start moving as soon as I opened the door, and this kind of thing. So I was carrying on researching it, trying to find out what was going on for me, and the next incident happened. I had been becoming more concerned about what was happening while I was asleep. Not because I had a particular fear or dislike of the ETs, quite the contrary. My instinct was that they were very loving, evolved, spiritual beings. However, the thought of some being entering my bedroom and taking me or doing things to me while I was in bed, that in itself freaks me out somewhat. So I'm researching things and hearing a lot of the negative stories about the ETs, and it didn't feel right, but I was researching every angle of this stuff. And I woke up one morning and my hip felt very painful. And I thought, what on earth is that? So I couldn't see it because it was right on the edge of my hip. I couldn't see it very well, but I could see that there were some marks there. So I went to the mirror. I had a full-length mirror in the bathroom. And sure enough, there were 3 triangulated puncture marks on my hip, on my right hip. And again, the photo is on my YouTube channel. Now at that point I started to panic because they hurt. These marks actually hurt. And they carried on being painful for about 2 or 3 weeks. So then I thought, I'm going to go out of my mind. And I started contacting all kinds of organisations, asking for help and some clarity about what was going on. And I spoke to many organisations, and I was particularly concerned because I was getting the distinct impression that the beings that I was connecting with were the Greys. Now, I since know that certainly in terms of the classic Greys, that's not what I'm experiencing. However, that was the feeling that I had at the time, and so I contacted a number of organisations, and I was in a terrible panic. Every night I was worried to sleep, so I was staying up until it was light, and then I felt I was able to sleep. And eventually I tracked down 2 individuals who really helped me. One was the French representative for an organisation I think called NICAR, which is basically an American organisation that helps ET experiences. And she told me that she hadn't had any negative experiences, even with the variety of grey that she had been in contact with, and that I should just chill out about the whole thing. And she was so casual about it that that helped me enormously. And the second person that helped me, which was sometime later, was Mary Rodwell. And she was fantastic. In fact, she was the person who totally got me on track with my understanding of my ET experiences. So I was having a strange kind of flip-flop experiences. Some felt very negative, some felt very positive. Around this time, I also got up one morning, and there was, I noticed that there was a file on my desktop of a photograph. And I thought, oh, I don't remember that. So I clicked on it, and what I saw totally blew me away, because it was a photograph of my living room, which must have been taken by my webcam when I wasn't there. And there's a disembodied face floating above the sofa that was stunningly beautiful, stunningly beautiful. It was a pink face and had the most mesmerising eyes that almost seemed to be alive, even though it was a photograph. And the more you looked, the more beautiful the eyes became. I showed it to other people, and some of the reactions I got were really amazing. And on the left of this photo, there's a silhouette of a human face, which wasn't mine. It's not the silhouette of my face. So unfortunately, I lost this photo when my computer crashed. But it was amazing, and was yet another example of the incredible flip-flopping going on between freaky experiences and very positive experiences. Around this time, I started to go out more and more at night, and was videoing orbs, and was getting more and more orb videos on my YouTube channel. In fact, I changed it from my name to Shrewsbury White Orb UFOs. And during this period, where I used to go to the local park, which is called the Quarry in Shrewsbury, I began to experience human interaction with what I believe were the military. And an example of this would be, I was in the park calling orbs, and being quite a hyper-vigilant person, I noticed everything, pretty much everything in my environment most of the time. And I noticed out of the corner of my eye movement on the other side of the river. So I looked over, and there were two guys who looked quite fit, and I would have thought were in their late 30s, who were dressed all in, appeared to be dressed all in black, in tight-fitting clothes, who walked down the jetty of the boat club on the other side of the river, stepped noiselessly into the river, and then disappeared. And I thought, am I going to get ambushed by the military? Is this a MILAB operation, military abduction? So I thought, well, I'm not going to stop and find out. So I didn't want to actually leave because I wanted to see what happened. So I edged backwards towards the gate, the park gate, to be able to make an exit if I needed to. So I was kind of halfway back to the gate. And suddenly I see that these two guys have crossed the river, got out noiselessly again, no splashing, and they're crouched or lying underneath a park bench, which is about 100 yards from me. And they're shining an LED light at me, which doesn't send out a beam, it's just a very bright but non-directional light. And I thought, what the hell is that? And to this day, I don't fully understand the function of it, except to stop me from doing what I was doing and to let me know that I was being watched. And I had a number of experiences like this, and I always called orbs from the same place, which was very near the dingle, which is a little garden that Percy Thrower designed, which is actually inside the park behind. It's a fenced off garden. So I would stand next to this garden and call the orbs. And I went for a walk around this period, and sorry, no, the timeline is I got a phone call from my friend who lived on the same road, and he said, did you know there is a helicopter hovering above your house? And I did know that because I could hear it. So I decided to go for a walk and see what was going on, and I walked out of the house, crossed the road so I could see what was above the house, and sure enough there's a helicopter there, and I start walking towards the park, and the helicopter follows me slowly, and I get to the park and I decide to do a little experiment. And next to the main gates there's a large tree. So I decided to hide behind the tree, and at this point the helicopter is hovering above the park at low altitude, very low altitude. So I hid behind the tree, and the helicopter moved so that it could see me. So I went further behind the tree, and the helicopter moved again so that it could see me, and then I've moved again, and the helicopter did the same thing. And at this point the helicopter flew to the spot where I always call the orbs, circled it 3 times, hovering over the spot, just went round and round, and then flew off at a very fast rate. And I knew that that was a message to me, that they always aware of my activities. So I was having the most extraordinary experiences, both with the ETs and orbs, and also with the military. Now, around this time I met my future wife, and on the first visit that she made to England, I was really engrossed in my ET experiences, and I was taking her out and calling orbs with her, and predicting when the orbs were going to be around, or and we would open the front door and there would be orbs there waiting, and it was quite magical and quite amazing. And I decided that I wanted to see them in the flesh. So I thought, well, they're highly telepathic. Why don't I just ask that they come and see me? So what I decided to do was to write a note and leave it on my bedside table. And the note said, "If you think I could handle it, could you please appear for me, because I'd like to see you." And the same night, we're lying in bed, my future wife and I, and we had been shopping that day, and there were, we'd left several carrier bags at the foot of the bed, because we bought some clothes, and both of us heard a little pit patter of light feet on the carrier bags, and I said to her, "Can you hear that?" She said yes, and I couldn't believe it, and I realised that they were in the room. Now, being from the city and having experienced mice and rats and all kinds of things, the one thing that I'm always careful of is when I move into somewhere, I go around and check for mouse holes, and if I find any, I seal them. And there were no mouse holes in there. There was nothing in the room at all, and it was a very small bedroom, incidentally, as well. So we're hearing this pitter-patter across the carrier bags at the foot of the bed, and then nothing, because they would have been on the carpet. And it didn't concern me. In fact, you know, I thought, oh well, that's what they decided to do. That's their response to my request. And I basically decided to go to sleep, and I suddenly felt a hand on my hip, which was the same hip where I'd experienced triangulated puncture marks that had been painful for a couple of weeks, which incidentally I believe may have been some kind of implant. So I felt that hip being touched, and immediately turned round to my future wife Dee and said, "Did you just touch me?" And she was facing the other way in the bed, and she said, "No." And I said, "I've just been touched." She didn't reply. And I knew that I'd been touched by the ETs. Both of us discussed it the following day. We went to sleep shortly after that, and we both of us have worked as psychics, clairvoyants, and we both had a very similar experience. I saw white beings that were roughly 4 foot tall in my mind's eye. I had almost a vision as I heard these beings walking around the room of these 4 foot tall beings that were white but glowing, kind of like beautiful glowing children almost around that, because they were around that kind of size. Dee saw beings of the same size, but I think she said that they were like a violet colour, glowing violet. But apart from the colour, all the other descriptions, all the other aspects of them matched between what both of us saw in our mind's eye when we were hearing all the sounds. So during that period as well, I was still seeing orbs around the house, and generally having an awful lot of experiences both with orbs and the military. I think I'll leave it at that for this particular section, and in the next section I'm going to talk about when I moved house to my present location, where I've filmed the majority of the orb videos that I have on my channel, and how my experiences continued in different ways here, leading up to my recent experience of seeing ETs in the flesh. So I hope you enjoyed that little talk.